all across America and around the world. This is Veterans Radio. This is Veterans Radio. And now, your host for today's program, Dale Throneberry.
Hey, and welcome to Veterans Radio. My name is Dale Throneberry, and we are all covered with snow from I don't know how far west all the way to the East Coast, and we're trying to get a hold of our guests today, and I'm hoping that they're not, inundated in igloos and so forth. So we're just going to continue to talk. We've got two guests, hopefully, that are going to be here today. Number one is Brian DeLong, and he is from the Guardian Angels Medical Service Dogs. And the reason that I'm asking Brian to come on the program is that he, or the organization, was one of the favorite organizations, I guess you could say, of one of our very good friends, Keith King, who was the founder of the National Veterans Development Council, one of our major supporters, who passed away on January 1st. And they asked for donations to be made to this organization. And I also have a good friend who has a service dog from this organization. So that's why we're asking, hopefully, that Brian will be able to join us in just a little bit. And of course, the second interview is going to be with our good friend, Rebecca Grant, who is going to be talking about foreign policy. As you all know, what's going on. Well, maybe we don't know everything that's going on in the world, but we're going to be talking about Greenland, Venezuela, China, everything else that's going on out there with the current administration. And hopefully everything will work out fine. And we'll see how that goes. But the other thing I wanted to remind everybody of is, if you want to get in on the conversation today, you can give us a call at 734-822-1600, 734-822-1600. The reason I'm giving that number out today, this is because we record our program live on Sundays from 5 to 6 p.m. For those of you that are listening to the pre-recorded program, obviously you don't get an opportunity to call in and ask us questions. But if you tune in on Sundays through our website, veteransradio.org, you can give us a call at that number, 734-822-1600. All right, well, I'll just continue to move along here with all the things that we need to talk about while we are waiting. Be kind of cool, I think, to find out how much snow everybody's getting. I talked to relatives in New Jersey today, and he said they've already plowed twice. It looks like they're getting anywhere from 12 to 18 inches. I think we're not going to get very much where we are today. Let me thank our sponsors before our guests show up. So number one, of course, is Legal Help for Veterans. Legal Help for Veterans specializes in veterans' disability claims. Call Legal Help for Veterans at 800-693-4800 or go to their website, legalhelpforveterans.com. The National Veterans Business Development Council, better known as NVBDC, is the nation's leading third-party authority for certification of veteran-owned businesses. For more information, go to their website, nvbdc.org, or give them a call at 888-237-8433. The National Veterans Business Development Council is kind of an unusual organization. I'm just going to give you a look. I know we've talked about this before, but I wanted to let you know that if you are a veteran-owned business and you want to do business with the federal government or with many corporations, you need to be certified. And by that certification, I mean that you are legitimately a veteran-owned business. And this is what NVBDC does, is they run you through a certification process to verify that you are actually a veteran-owned business and some of the other things that the federal government wants to know about your company. And then they help you process everything, make this, submit all the necessary paperwork and come back. And then you can really, put right on all your logo and everything else that you are a veteran-owned business. So check them out. Maybe you're starting out, many veterans or entrepreneurs, they really, they like to try things on their own. Go to nvbdc.org and everything is there for you. We're also sponsored locally by our our good friends at the Irwin Press Corps and American Legion Post 46 and the Charles S. Kettles Vietnam Veterans of America Chapter 310, both of Ann Arbor, Michigan. Hey, if you'd like to support Veterans Radio, you're more than welcome, but you can go to our website, veteransradio.org, and click on the donate button. We do have a few costs involved to be on the stations that we are on and everything else that goes on with running a radio program in today's world. So we would encourage you, if you can, to go to our website and make that donation. We do greatly appreciate that. We're also got a couple of things that are coming up here on Veterans Radio. We're in the planning stages for Radio on the River. I can't remember which one it is, 5 or 6 now. And we're going to be out at Freedom River again, out in Pinckney, Michigan. And we're trying to figure out if we want to have helicopters out there again. I know we're working on having a static display of military vehicles, which I think is kind of cool. We've got a contact with the Michigan, I think it's the Michigan National Guard. Maybe we're going to be able to bring a Chinook out there for a static display. No rides, unfortunately, but I think that would be kind of fun. So Mark, look at your calendar. It's going to be either the last week of September or the first week of October. We haven't really been able to finalize that yet due to commitments by other parts of our organization. So let me move along here as we can. And let me tell you a little bit about what the Guardian Angels Medical Service Dogs do. This is an organization down in Florida, and their website is medicalservicedogs.org. And the thing about them is we all know about these service dogs and the great things that they can do for veterans and, other people that have suffered from post-traumatic stress or TBIs or, there's mobility challenges. There's everything that are involved. And it said on their website, as I mentioned before, is medicalservicedogs.org. It's a 501c3 nonprofit dedicated to empowering veterans, first responders, and individuals with disabilities by providing highly trained service dogs that help people regain independence and improve their quality of life. Their service dogs are trained to assist with a range of conditions, including PTSD, traumatic brain injury, mobility challenges, seizures and diabetic disorders, and hearing impairments. They also offer lifelong support, including a medical savings plan that covers veterinary care, ensuring both your recipients and the service dogs receive the highest standard of ongoing care. Throughout partnerships with nationally certified mental health professionals and our VA-approved college-accredited apprenticeship program, we're advancing service dog training methods and setting a high standard of excellence across the industry. Driven by compassion and a commitment to lifelong support, we strive daily to make a meaningful difference in the lives of our recipients and their families. We love these organizations, obviously, that provide these dogs for for people that need service dogs. I'm stepping on my tongue here myself. But this is an organization I think that you should check out. Again, it's medicalservicedogs.org. They are, as I mentioned, they're a 501c3 nonprofit organization. There's no cost, for the person that receives the dogs. So I think it's something that you might want to look into. Theoretically, I'm hoping that the person I was going to talk to, Brian, might join us later on. If he does, I hope I can bring him on at that time. So we're going to skip right ahead because my good friend has just joined us here on Zoom, and that is Dr. Rebecca Grant. And Dr. Grant, let me read you. Good afternoon. I hope things are going well in the DC area.
Yes, we have a little bit of a snowstorm, but it is just down to the freezing rain. And wow, do we have a lot of hot air coming out of Washington, as always.
That's for sure. Let me give our audience a little background on you. Dr. Grant is one of our favorite people to have on Veterans Radio. She is a national security analyst based in Washington, D.C., specializing in defense and aerospace research and national security consulting. She is a vice president of the Lexington Institute, which is a center-right think tank headquartered in Arlington, Virginia, that focuses mainly on defense and security policy. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about them later on. Dr. Grant has over 20 years experience working in the United States Air Force, with the Air Force, excuse me, she's not in the Air Force and Army, the Navy and other top aerospace clients. In addition, she has often appeared on television as an expert on national security from Fox News, CNN, MSNBC, and is a regular series regular on the Smithsonian's Air Warriors. I think that's where we found you in the first place. She also writes on China, Russia, and other technology and national security topics for Fox News Opinion. Her military books include 75 Great Airmen, The B-2 Goes to War, and Battle-Tested Aircraft Carriers in Afghanistan and Iraq. Whew. She's graduated from Wesley College, and she earned her PhD in International Relations from the London School of Economics. This is why we have her on the program. She's one of our favorite guests. She tells it like it is. And all right, Dr. Grant, where do we begin?
Well, let's get your globe and spin it around a couple times and put your finger down, and we may land on Iran, where the USS Abraham Lincoln aircraft carrier is approaching. We may land on Venezuela. We may land on Greenland.
I know.
So let's, and of course, Ukraine. So much to talk about. In China, they're about all of it. But let's start at the top of the globe, at the North Pole, if that's okay with you.
That's fine with me. We can do this. All right, so let's go look at Greenland. What's going on there? How come the president wants Greenland?
Well, he does have an eye for prime real estate. And,
that's Greenland, all right.
It is. Greenland is a geologist's treasure trove. They have some oil resources there under that ice. They also have a lot of critical minerals, gold and copper as well. But you don't often think about Greenland. And I do think a little bit for President Trump. And, I don't think he'd deny this. He does like his real estate. And it's a little bit, Dale, like that house on your block that you drive by and you really think, wow, I really wish I could buy that house. And it's really not for sale.
Right.
You've always really wanted it. So President Trump started talking about Greenland actually back during his first term. But the reason becomes very apparent if you do look at a globe, and not just the Mercator flat projection, but when you look at a globe from starting at the North Pole, and you can see on one side there is Russia. They've got their big bases on the Kola Peninsula. They have nuclear bomber bases up there. Of course, they have their submarine bases. And then you move around. There's Iceland, Greenland, the GIUK gap, where Russia runs its submarines down into the Atlantic. And then you look on the other side, and wow, there we are, Canada and the United States, with all the routes for Russian bombers, Russian intercontinental ballistic missiles, Chinese submarines, Russian bombers, Chinese bombers with Russian bombers. Everything that could fly around in that airspace comes over across Greenland. And watching it all is our base that you will remember as Thule. It's now called Pitufik, but it's still in the same place up there, 900 miles up from Nuuk. Up in Greenland is this base, which is a United States Space Force base, key to missile warning. Also, a couple space squadrons there who track our satellites on orbit, but they also do a mission called Space Domain Awareness, where they track China's 1,300 satellites on orbit and anything else that may be there. And that is an increasingly important mission. So basically, if you're President Trump and you want to build more of a missile shield for the Western Hemisphere, for the United States and Canada, you have got to have Greenland. And you can't let China get their hooks into Greenland over the long term. Several years ago, the Greenland prime minister, it was different from who it is now, went to Beijing and said, hey, we need some new airports, some improvements in our airports. Would you all like to invest? And, you can lease the runways and all that. Well, Denmark came in and said, hold on a minute. You can't do that. Not so fast. We're not going to have that happen. But the long term, the kind of the decades long threat is the combination of China really getting a foothold in that area, and then, of course, the need to keep up this space surveillance.
So we only have one base in Greenland. I know it was very important during World War II.
Oh, it was enormously important during World War II. That was the route that aircraft flew over to England. B-17s, P-38s, the fighters, all that would go up across that route, and there were several airfields there at the time. A couple harrowing stories of a B-17 that was lost there in 1942, and a Norwegian who was an Air Force colonel ended up going and rescuing them. Incredible story of all the airmen that went through Greenland. But at this point, our main facility is the surveillance station at Pituffik, which was put there initially for the distant early warning radars. It's been massively upgraded, and it's right up in the Arctic Circle. And now, NATO understands the importance of the high north and the Arctic, so it's possible to get everything done that needs to be done for Greenland within the NATO framework. What President Trump has done is he kind of just skipped about 29 steps and moved. He put this on the top of the international agenda real fast, okay?
Yeah.
And the good part of that is, if you're at the State Department of War, you could have spent a long time trying to get meetings with Denmark and NATO and work this through the process, or you can just have Trump go in and bulldoze it, and they're actually negotiating now for an agreement. We don't know any of the details of this agreement. Remember, Trump threatened to put tariffs on just about everybody, Denmark,
Yes.
England, you name it. So NATO's fantastic Secretary General Mark Rutte, who he's from the Netherlands. He used to be their prime minister, so he's a smart fellow. He has a negotiation underway. And Trump has said that will give the U.S. infinite access. So, Dale, it may turn out to be a little bit like that British base at Akrotiri on Cyprus down in the Mediterranean, where Cyprus is its own country, but there's actually a sovereign British base there. So we'll see what comes out of this deal. It is massive wheeling and dealing. Just like if you had a New York real estate developer running foreign policy, this is what it would look like.
I think so. I can't imagine it. I've heard about. I guess it was Iceland more than Greenland. As far as tourism is concerned. But I don't want to see condos going up on the Arctic Ocean. That's going to be a little bit of a stretch.
As long as they aren't Chinese condos, okay.
Well, that's
so
true.
Right, yeah.
That's true. I think I think you put it right. That kind of bulldoze his way in there, and because he keeps continually seems to upset people by bulldozing his way into things, and then has to. I understand what he's trying to do, but I think he kind of must have skipped the diplomacy courses that were available that maybe you took.
Well, I tell you one thing. I think behind all this is he has received, I'm sure, some pretty scary looking briefings from the Pentagon looking at the recent Chinese and Russian activity there. The Chinese put a submarine under the Arctic ice cap. They have nuclear submarine, they have nuclear powered and nuclear armed submarines, but they aren't as big a submarine power as Russia, and certainly not as we are. So for them to be up there prowling around is very interesting. There is a lot of melting sea ice, and that has changed the commercial routes. China ran a ship from China up across the Arctic Circle and down into Great Britain over the summer. So I think Trump is looking at briefings saying, oh my gosh, if I don't have the outpost of Greenland, the outlook from Greenland, and if China gets control of that, we're toast. And I think they really are some pretty scary briefings at that level. And then when you add in the Space Force piece, again, you got to look at it from the perspective of your globe. I still have my father's globe from the 1920s. And you just look at this and you're like, I get it. And then now don't just look at the land, but look up to low Earth orbit and geosynchronous orbit, where we have Elon Musk putting the Starlink satellites. We have Amazon putting up a low Earth orbit constellation, all to do internet broadband. It's kind of the new domain. China just said they want to put 200,000 satellites in low Earth orbit, and that's going to take a long time. But you get the point. And so Greenland and Pituffik, because of the geometry, is really essential for on-orbit management and orbital defense. So you just put all that together, and he's like, "That's it. I'm done. We have to have Greenland. We have to have everything we need, and I'm going to go get it done." So I think the national security is really, it truly is his primary motivation.
Well, I think if you explained it as thoroughly as you just did, people wouldn't be so upset if they understood the background a little bit more.
I know, right? It's just a completely different style. But the top NATO allies, there's a group of about 9 of them that are either up along the Arctic or along the Baltics, and they exercise together quite a bit. It's just who you think: Norway, Sweden, and Finland now. Iceland, of course, which is a really important NATO base there. A lot of rotational presence. The Baltic republics. They all really understand the importance of the high north. It's just that people have ignored the Arctic for a long time, and then get a little bit caught up in the climate change. Do you believe or not a believer? But that's irrelevant. I mean, the sea ice is melting. Low Earth orbit is important, and they're really scary Russian and Chinese missile systems. So that's sort of the bottom line on Greenland. We'll see how it turns out. I hope it'll be something good for the Greenlanders. I don't think we're going to be adding Greenland to the United States flag anytime soon, unless they make a terrible mistake and let China in. Then there will be a U.S. flag on Greenland faster than you would believe.
That's true. That's true.
They let China in there. That's it. Forget it.
Yeah, I mean, so Greenland kind of falls underneath the idea of this Golden Dome, correct?
Correct. It's all about Golden Dome, and you hear Golden Dome talked about a lot in the press. We know that the Pentagon has moved out quite smartly. They've started to open up some contract vehicles for Golden Dome, and just about everybody that among the big defense companies and the new innovative companies are going to be playing a part in this. What we don't know is exactly what this missile shield will look like. Now, I'm going to tell you the public relations campaign on it is that it is to protect the continental United States and against, obviously, Russian, Chinese, and other rogue missiles, North Korea, Iran, if they ever get to that point, all of that. What exactly it will do, we have not been informed from the Pentagon. I think top of their priority list will actually be the ICBM bases, intercontinental ballistic missile bases, some of the other, what would have been the old strategic air command bases, key bomber bases, things like that. You're going to have to protect that nuclear deterrent, have to protect bases like Pituffik first, right? Then I think there'll be a great deal more protection. Because what we have now is a missile defense system that's set up for the West Coast to intercept what they call rogue missiles. And that means 1 or 2 or 3. Okay, a small number. There are interceptors up in Alaska at Fort Greely, I think 44 interceptors there. Another 4 down at Vandenberg on the California coast. And that system is operational, ground-based interceptor. It's a fabulous hit-to-kill missile system. They can take out incoming intercontinental ballistic missiles, if they can do them from a place like North Korea, and take them out in the exo atmosphere, way above 65,000 feet. But the rest of the country is not protected by that system. So the main hope for Golden Dome is to greatly improve our missile defenses, particularly against that type of threat.
I think if you go back to your analogy of actually a globe, you can see that things are much closer than most of us realize, for sure. Like you just got to go over the North Pole, and you're right here.
That's right. And the other thing about Golden Dome is, from the whole Cold War on, and you talked about the importance of Greenland in World War II, and of course the early Cold War, we kind of knew everything was going to come out of Russia. At this point, China and others have this sort of fractional orbital system where you can put something in orbit and then plunk it down from a different direction, meaning that while the vast majority would come across that path that Greenland watches, there's also a possibility now to come up from the south. And so that means more surveillance. The good news here is that our missile defense technology has improved out of all recognition. If anybody's old enough to remember Star Wars of the 1980s, well, it was a good idea, but the technology really wasn't there. Now we have the technology. Three main components are the hit-to-kill interceptors, like we have with the ground-based system, and frankly, like we use with our standard missile family, the SM-31Bs that hit Iran's missiles coming towards Israel back in 2024. Anyway, the whole hit-to-kill technology is very, very good, so that's part one. Part two is greatly improved surveillance of all types, radars, et cetera. And then part three is we've got a great Space Force constellation now, and it's shifting away from just a few big satellites that watch for missile warning, shifting down into what they call, it's a big long name, the proliferated warfighting architecture. So It means a lot of little satellites all doing the job that one big satellite used to do, and that makes it more resilient in case of an attack. So you put those three pieces together and probably some other cool stuff that we don't even know about, and you've got the ability to create more of a missile shield over the U.S. Of course, I think President Trump thinks a lot about the Iron Dome missile shield over Israel. It's a different tactical problem, but he'd like to see a shield that's more effective, and we do need it to protect at least our critical infrastructure.
Yeah, I could understand that, but that Iron Dome is, much smaller than this Golden Dome is going to have to be. I mean, while you were talking, and I don't want to upset or put any fear in anybody, but with all these satellites roaming around up there, are there satellites now that are that have the ability to rain terror down on everybody?
Well, the first thing that satellites have the ability to do is to rain terror on each other. So both China and Russia have tested orbital maneuvers with satellites, and that's basically, it's kind of like bumper cars, where one satellite goes up to another one, they're pretty fragile, and bumps it out of orbit, or bumps it into a graveyard orbit, or puts out a grappling hook, or laser blinds its optics, or spray paints it. And so there's a real ability of one satellite to get in the way of another. And we watch that through this mission called Space Domain Awareness that Pidufik and some other bases are involved in. It's a big part of what the Space Force does. And that applies to military satellites, but also to commercial satellites. And you know how dependent we are on GPS, and increasingly on the low Earth orbit satellites like those that host Starlink. So we actually have commercial companies that work with our Space Force to, keep everything in order. But there is that potential. And China has a space plane. It's been up 3 times. We don't know what it does. But anything that you launch from orbit is going to come down at a very, very high ballistic multiple Mach rate.
Yeah.
So is there a threat? Yeah. And it means we have to be aware of what's going on up there. Now, we are still number 1 in space. Absolutely. And I think there are a lot of elements to it that the Space Force Guardians, they do the mission, but they do not talk about it. But I can assure you we are tops in that, but it's an area that we have to defend just as carefully as anything else these days.
Actually, because I'm thinking of the drones have gotten bigger and bigger and fly higher and higher and farther. And doesn't take much of an imagination to say, okay, that's next.
Right. And, you think of our biggest drone is still the Global Hawk, which can fly for more than 24 hours. And it is a surveillance-only platform. It is not armed. It's a very, very, very effective surveillance platform. But when you think about something like a space plane, then you have the ability to conduct operations from orbit. And it's something that, we didn't used to think about much, but it's definitely something we have to think about now, again, so that we can deter the Russians and the Chinese and anybody else from trying to get into that.
All right, we are talking with our good friend Rebecca Grant here. We're going to take a quick break and listen to our Medal of Honor segment for today. It's about a soldier from World War II at the Battle of the Bulge. So you're listening to Veterans Radio, and we'll be right back.
The Medal of Honor is the highest award for valor in combat given a member of the Armed Forces of the United States. There have been over 3,400 recipients of the nation's highest award. This is one of them. First Lieutenant John Fox called in artillery fire on his own position. Details after this. If you have a VA claim denied by the Board of Veterans' Appeals, contact Legal Help for Veterans at 1-800-693-4800. They're experts in handling cases before the U.S. Court of Appeals for Veterans Claims. Their number again, 1-800-693-4800. On Christmas night in 1944, enemy soldiers in civilian clothes gradually infiltrated the town Fox and his men were in, and by early morning, the town was largely in hostile hands. An organized attack by uniformed German units began at 4 a.m. Being greatly outnumbered, most of the American forces were forced to withdraw from the town, but Fox and other members of his observer party voluntarily remained on the second floor of a house to direct defensive artillery fire. Fox reported the Germans were in the streets and attacking in strength. He then called for defensive artillery fire to slow the enemy advance. As the Germans continued to press the attack towards the area that Fox occupied, he adjusted the artillery fire closer to his position. Finally, he was warned that the next adjustment would bring the deadly artillery right on top of his position. After acknowledging the danger, Lieutenant Fox insisted that the last adjustment be fired, as this was the only way to defeat the attacking soldiers. Later, when a counterattack retook the position from the Germans, Lieutenant Fox's body was found with the bodies of approximately 100 German soldiers. The Medal of Honor series is a production of Veterans Radio.
Military veterans touch everyone's life. I'm guessing right now you're thinking of a veteran, a close friend, relative. Maybe it's you. Even the toughest of us sometimes need help, but don't know where to turn for support. You don't need special training to help a veteran in your life. We can all help someone going through a difficult time. Learn how you can be there for veterans. Visit veteranscrisisline.net. veteranscrisisline.net. A message from the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs.
And we are back here on Veterans Radio, and after listening to that little segment, I was just thinking about veterans, and I'm thinking about this generation of veterans. They have got so much more sophisticated weaponry and everything else than we ever have heard of or ever even thought about during World War II or when I was in the service in Vietnam. It is like science fiction. So we are talking with Dr. Rebecca Grant here. We just talked a little bit about the Golden Dome and Greenland and everything else that's going on over there. So let's take a look at Ukraine, because Ukraine kind of has fallen into the background a little bit right now.
Well, it's not making the headlines, but there is a lot going on. And the U.S., Russia, and Ukraine just wrapped up 3 days of talks in the UAE over the United Arab Emirates. Prior to that, Trump's negotiators, Special Envoy Ambassador Steve Witkoff, who is a New York real estate friend of Trump's from way back, who's been just a really effective, super effective diplomat. He helped get the Gaza ceasefire. And then, of course, Trump's son-in-law, Jared Kushner, are working as a duo, and both Kushner and Witkoff were in Moscow a few days ago talking with Putin yet again, and then they all moved in. For the first time, there were actually three-way talks with representatives from the U.S., Russia, and Ukraine. They're talking in the UAE. Now, no ceasefire came out of this, but all sides, including Zelensky, reported that they felt it had been productive and they had made progress. We're getting almost no indication of what the substance of these talks are, but the word is that they're still pivoting around the final terrain map. And here, the problem is Putin. Well, Putin is the problem everywhere, Putin and his relationship with China. But to be specific, Putin has been asking for Ukraine's forces to basically pull back out of the Donbass. And as I know your listeners know, Russia has not taken all of the Donbass. After all this time, they are making inch-by-inch progress, but Ukraine is pretty much holding them on the ground. So it's a really bitter thing to have Ukraine's forces pull back. It may be, however, that Zelensky is agreeable to that in principle, and they're going to use sort of a legal dodge by saying the borders haven't changed in law de jure, but the borders will change de facto, okay? So I would like to see every last Russian out of Ukraine, but most likely Russia will hold some territory in the Donbass. The key is Zelensky, understandably, does not want to pull back the forces before a ceasefire.
Right.
On top of that, terrible attacks continue, including during the talks in the UAE. Putin was attacking, 375 drones, about 20 missiles mixed in, which is their standard tactics. It makes it harder for the air defenses, although Ukraine's air defenses have done a tremendous job. But the last barrage had 6 Iskanders, that's a dual nuclear conventional capable intermediate range missile, 2 of the Zircon hypersonics, 12 cruise missiles, 3 of something else, some from the S-300 air defense system, all mixed in with these drones and headed towards basically Kharkiv, Kyiv, and big attacks on Ukraine's energy grid. We often hear about the nuclear power plant at Zaporizhia, which is Europe's biggest plant. It has been offline for quite a while. It's in Russian hands. There are a couple of other nuclear plants out towards the south and the west in Ukraine, but the Russians have been, this is so awful, they have been targeting the backup power, the generator literally that goes into the nuke plant so you can restart it if you need to, or you can pump cold water to keep the reactor at the right temperature. So these horrible attacks continue. So actually there is a lot going on in Ukraine. We just aren't hearing as much about it just at the moment. And I think in a way, this may be a good sign. My view is that Trump is not going to give up until he gets this war settled. And he's got Zelensky being agreed to really just about everything. The reason is, at the end of this, there is an excellent economic opportunity for Ukraine, access to the EU, which they've wanted for so long to be in that common market, strong security guarantees, and believe me, Dale, that will include a lot of equipment, a lot of American equipment, Abrams tanks, air defenses, air power, all up and down through Europe to make sure that's there. So there's a way for Ukraine to really thrive if they can get a ceasefire. And I think that's why Zelensky has continued to stay in this process. My heart goes out to all of them. I hope that they're getting close. The trouble, of course, is Putin loves the war. He's nuts, and China backs him up.
And he's not, I hate to say, he's not trustworthy. He has not kept his word on anything.
And he hasn't even actually, you're quite right, he hasn't even agreed to anything. They get close and they'll talk about this and that, and they have made some progress. But, Trump a year ago thought that if he could just find the right economic deal, offer investment and take up some of the sanctions off Russia, that any reasonable person would agree to a ceasefire. Well, and that's true. But Putin is not reasonable. He alone, Putin and Putin alone, is the reason for this terrible situation in Ukraine. He's got Xi Jinping of China backing him up, and with those oil purchases and China supplying some defense electronics components into Russia. And of course, Iran set up a whole factory in Russia to make those Shahed drones.
Yeah.
With all that going, Putin just keeps it going. And he likes the war. He has a taste for the war. And it's all nonsense. It's not NATO expansion. It is nothing other than Putin's ambition that has driven that war. It's just horrible.
It is. I mean, I can't imagine trying to even talk with the guy to try to compromise on anything, because he doesn't do it. So you mentioned an important addition here, and that was China being involved in supporting Russia in Ukraine. So China's got their little tentacles out all over the world. Let's talk a little bit about what's going on with them.
Tentacles all over the world is exactly right. Although a couple of those got singed, and here I'm talking Venezuela, of course. It seems now it's been a few weeks since that stunning abduction of and apprehension of Nicolas Maduro.
Yeah.
But you know what Maduro did the last night that he was in Venezuela? He hosted a cocktail party for a special Chinese delegation that had been sent by China's president and dictator Xi Jinping, to go see what's going on. China had about $67 billion invested in Venezuela. They bought a lot of Venezuela's oil. And then, of course, China has Silk Belt and Road projects all over Central and South America. So in that sense, the apprehension of Maduro was a blow to China as well. I mean, Maduro was sort of a pawn of China and of Russia in some ways. And this is a blow to him. And I think it's another case of President Trump, just like with Greenland, putting a big emphasis on Western Hemisphere security. And that is really all about trying to make sure that China does not gain more inroads here in our own hemisphere. And that's really important over the next couple of decades.
Well, it certainly is. I know, I don't know, have they actually moved China out of the Panama Canal area?
That's right. That was one of Secretary of State Marco Rubio's first moves, was to get Panama to agree not to renew their Belt and Road deals with China. And there were two Chinese companies that were controlling access to the Panama Canal, and those contracts have been changed. Yeah, Rubio managed to pull that off like within the second week of the administration about a year ago. That's been very positive. But, like we were talking earlier about World War II and Greenland and how we used to ferry bombers and fighters over there. And you realize that the Western Hemisphere just looks so different. But even our leaders in World War II had to go and make sure that the Nazis couldn't get into South America and Central America.
Right.
Heck, the Germans were on Greenland. Not very many of them, but they were bombed and off they went. So just as we once secured the Western Hemisphere against Hitler and Nazi Germany, now we are trying to secure it against the inroads of China. It's just a much more complicated task because of the economic power of China and because they've been after these deals for so long.
There's a lot of things going on, and we don't have enough time to cover all of them. But let's get into in the last portion here. Let's talk about some new U.S. technology, because we have the Detroit Auto Show going on right now, and I did see things on the news about a new Abrams tank that they were rolling through the Huntington Center.
Yes, this is very exciting news. And I've got to tell you, the Army Chief of Staff, General George, and the Army Secretary, Dan Driscoll, are a really effective team. Driscoll's served in the Army, but he's a very young man. I think he may be just 39 or 40 years old. He came into this job, from the business world, and he has been very effective. One of the first things they did was they cut some programs. They decided to accelerate a few other programs, and the Abrams tank upgrade is one of those programs. So rolled out at the Detroit Auto Show is the new Abrams. Now, there are a lot of variants of Abrams. I know your listeners know all about this. Tank's been around a long time. So just bear with me. This one's going to be called the M1E3, E for the engineering change. So this is quite an upgrade. And one of the most important pieces is that this is going to be a hybrid electric tank. Can you believe it?
A long extension cord.
Well, it's interesting. They are indeed looking for a battery, but they're replacing, I guess, the older Abrams, they're replacing that engine. They'll have a Caterpillar diesel engine, which a good thing there is the Caterpillar can be serviced all around the world. So that will be very good. They're looking for a battery, but it will have a hybrid electric drivetrain as well. And so what the Army says is that is, one, going to make the tank lighter, about 20 to 30% lighter. And that current Abrams, we're talking about 80 tons. So if we can go down, 80 tons, right? Down to 60 tons would be great. And then they're looking for some fuel efficiency, which, again, I know your listeners understand that that's a really major tactical advantage. The Army's talking about fuel efficiency improvements for the M1E3 of up to 50%. So that's great. But I guess all the really cool stuff is not only under the hood, but down in the cockpit, and that is the software. A new system like this is usually built around almost a plug-and-play open systems architecture that soldiers now and in the future can use this to install new apps and upgrade capabilities without having to go through all the rigorous and extensive testing. You plug it in at a point in the vehicle software where all the things that make the vehicle run are protected, but the new app can come in. So the Army thinks this is going to have just some great connectivity, and it'll have a crew of 3. But they are not alone. They're going to be very connected to a far more networked battle space, and still have the massive, fantastic firepower that the Abrams is known for. Yeah. And I think the Army is taking very careful notes from the Ukraine war, looking at anti-drone systems, drone protection, and all the other things. Because the Army says, look, we've got the best tanks now. We want to have the best tanks in 2030, the best tanks in 2040. We always want the American Abrams to be the best tank.
Right. Absolutely. Do you know anything about Russia developing new tanks, or China, that are comparable at all?
Well, Russia is doing a lot of manufacturing, but they aren't able to innovate in the same way. They've lost thousands of tanks in Ukraine, and yet they are still able to produce. So, but this is going to be just far and away an improvement. And why this is important, you still really need the tank in Europe. The Europeans are scared to death of Putin, understandably. And when you look at the key points in the Baltics, the gap around Kaliningrad, the Suwalki Gap, if you're Romania, if you're Poland, and you're going to look at Russia for the next several generations, knowing what they've done in Ukraine, you want a lot of tanks. And then, Dale, when we get a ceasefire in Ukraine, you're looking at an 800-mile front to defend. Right. And that is going to, again, require tanks. Not necessarily U.S. tanks. I mean, we have a lot of U.S. tanks in Poland, as well as Poland buying their own, and Romania too. But Ukraine is going to need advanced tanks so that there is never a possibility for Putin to change his mind and go back in.
Right. Whoever the next guy is.
Or whoever the next guy is, exactly. It's going to be a generational defense. And while you've got to have the whole joint force, air power, very key to this too, missile defense, but in the end, it really is the tanks that are able to deter the taking of territory. And we are going to see top-line tanks in NATO like this M1E3, I think, for a very long time. So I'm glad to see it rolling out. The cool thing about it, too, they are actually going to try to accelerate this program and deliver it 5 years early. Yes, 5 years early. The Army is really ambitious. They're doing this with the MV-75 as well, which is their future long-range assault aircraft. It's the tilt rotor. They're going to have that delivered a little bit early, and they want to have the Abrams come early as well.
Oh, yes. Well, let's talk about President Trump's battleships.
Right. I mean, I think the one of the Navy surface warfare admirals put it really well 2 weeks ago when he said, "Wow, I never thought I would be tasked to build a battleship." But sure enough, President Trump made this announcement, and he says it's going to be called the Trump class. Yeah, we'll see. We'll see. So he's got the Navy and the shipbuilders working on actually a whole golden fleet. So there are a lot of other things. Of course, we're getting our nuclear-powered aircraft carriers. There will be a Navy frigate, which is a smaller type of surface combatant. They canceled one program and started another one. There will be some unmanned surface vessels for the Navy as well. They have some already. There will be more. But the pièce de résistance is the battleship. You really have to think of it as like our current fantastic DDG-51 Arleigh Burke-class destroyers, but 3 times bigger. Why would you want that? Well, it's simple. It's to carry more missiles and more armament in those vertical launch tubes. They want to have some hypersonic capable, well, all missiles are hypersonic in certain flight profiles, but they want some new hypersonic missiles. And I got to tell you something, they're very big. So they're big, okay? You need the space, and they want to have more missile tubes present in an area like Indo-PACOM. And that's the initiative behind the battleship. But this is like a clean sheet, new start. They will take the research they were doing on the next destroyer class called DDG-X, of course, experimental research there to see what the new destroyer could look like. They'll take that and run with it for the battleship. We're still waiting to see what costs might look like. But you know what's driving all of this, Dale, is the president has said that the defense budget next year will go from about $900 billion this year, $897 billion, something like that. It's going to be $1.5 trillion.
That's a lot of dollars.
That's the bill to pay. And you think, well, Congress isn't going to go for this. And then look back, it's actually Congress's idea. Senator Roger Wicker leading the way on shipbuilding and several others as well. When you look at the threats around the world, this is Trump thinking big again, but that it's this possible $1.5 trillion defense budget that could be driving the battleship, the acceleration of the Abrams tank, and maybe some more B-21 bombers, which that's rolling off the line now, and that program's doing very well too. But that is just what the Trump administration thinks is the money that we need to put in at this point, given the global threats from China and Russia and others.
Wow, that's a lot, and we've run out of time again, almost. I want to thank you so much, Dr. Grant, for being on the program. We've got a couple of minutes left. Is there any one last little message you'd like to leave our audience?
Well, I, again, just really want to thank all our service members who are out there today. We've been keeping a careful eye on Iran as we watch the USS Abraham Lincoln being called from Indo-PACOM back into the Middle East. We've seen airstrikes against ISIS targets. There's a lot brewing there and around the world, and America would not be a superpower, would not be the leader that we are today without the service of our men and women in uniform. And I just want to say thank you to those who have served and those who are serving right now.
That's a good line to end on. Well, thank you again so much. We're going to have you back on a little bit sooner. Have you thought about going into podcasting yourself?
Well, hey, there's something to think about. Stronger in 2026.
There you go. If you're not running for office.
I'll definitely take podcasting over politics.
Yeah, I know. I know what you mean. I know what you mean. All right. Well, that was Dr. Rebecca Grant. She's our national security expert. And, if you want to know what's going on, you can read more about Dr. Grant by going to the Lexington Institute's website. She has published quite a few articles on there that will kind of, recap what we talked about today, but I think that they're really interesting. I read some of them yesterday and today, and in addition to being a great guest on Veterans Radio, she's also a really good writer. So I would encourage you to go to the Lexington Institute's website and check them out. It's a lot of good info there, and I lean more to the left than I do to the right, but I'm learning a whole lot, and it makes a whole lot more sense when the information that you get is trustworthy, and that you can, there's no partisan things behind it, and I think that's what's a problem right now. Let's put it that way. So we are going to go out on a kind of a different song today. With everything that's going on in America right now, I just, God Bless America is my favorite song, but I'm going to go out today on Woody Guthrie's This Land Is Your Land, because I want everybody to think about, before we start getting all flustered and, just kind of going at each other without thinking about it, I think it's important that we sit back and, figure out a way that we can all talk about some things, because there's a lot of things going on out there that we have to be able to discuss without just getting in each other's faces. A little compromise, a little understanding, a little empathy, I think would be very helpful to, de-escalate some of the things that are going on across the country. And, it's very difficult not to react to some of the things that we're seeing on various television stations across the country in various areas, because we all know some people that live in those areas. And, when you start worrying about your neighbor, we got to be careful. So, yeah. So I'm really excited to have you listen to this song. When I was thinking about what I wanted to go out on today, I said, here's one for you. So here's Woody Guthrie with This Land Is Your Land. And until next week, this is Dale Throneberry. For all of us, you are dismissed.
This land is your land, and this land is my land. From the California to the New York Island, From the redwood forest to the Gulf Stream waters, this land was made for you and me. As I went a-walking that ribbon of highway, I saw above me that endless skyway, saw below me that golden valley. This land was made for you and me. I roamed and rambled, and I followed my footsteps to the sparkling sands of her diamond deserts. All around me a voice was sounding, this land was made for you and me. When the sun comes shining, then I was strolling, and the wheat fields waving, and the dust clouds rolling. The voice was chanting as the fog was lifting, this land was made for you and me. This land is your land, and this land is my land. From California to the New York Island, from redwood forests to the Gulf Stream waters, this land was made for you and me. When the sun comes shining, then I was strolling, and the wheat fields waving, the dust clouds rolling, the voice coming chanting, and the fog was lifting. This land was made for you and me.